Hey guys, thanks for checking out another episode of Rekt Radio. Today we have a good episode where we're talking about some development that's being done on the blockchain and some tools that can help you do that. So we have my guest today, Dr. Jay McCarthy from Reach. How are you, Doctor?
Hey, great. I'm doing awesome. There's a lot of exciting things going on in blockchain right now, and it's nice to talk to you.
What are some interesting things that you're looking on the development side that Reach hopes to be able to give you the ability to more easily do, would you say?
Yeah, so the whole idea of Reach is that we're trying to make a programming language and platform that really anybody can use successfully to build programs. An analogy that I like to use is with smartphone applications, where there was a day when I was young where you could go build an embedded systems app. You know what I mean? Like you could go hire an electrical engineer and like build a device and do low-level programming, and you could produce a handheld device that people carried around. But that is just so expensive to do that people didn't really do it. And what the smartphone really revolutionized is it made it so that any normal programmer could like create an interesting application themselves. And I think that our goal with Reach is to replicate that same sort of transformational experience, but for blockchain itself. The blockchains that are available now are just so efficient, and they have all sorts of advantages over some of the experimental things that people have done in the past. But a lot of the existing tools are just so hard to get into. Whereas I want to make something that, someone with like, no degree, no cryptography expertise, who just has a great idea can go actually build something and launch it for real. And that's what the vision of Reach is all about.
What do you think about the no code push that's being done by a lot of platforms?
Yeah, so the way that I like to think about this is that there's this kind of hierarchy or spectrum of different degrees of expertise and languages that you use when you're working with a computer. So as an example, traditional programming, there are people who can program in assembly, and there are certain things that you need to do in assembly, like, I don't know, a device driver or a compiler. Then there are low-level programming languages like C and C++ and, Rust or things like that, that are really a sweet spot for certain kinds of programs. Then there are more high-level languages, like you might say JavaScript and Java and OCaml, Haskell, Racket, these languages. And then there's things like Excel. Now, among those four possibilities of assembly, C, JavaScript, and Excel, clearly Excel is the most popular programming language on the planet. The thing, though, is that we don't typically think about Excel being a programming language because, us programmers, we kind of denigrate Excel, but really when you think about it, it's like way more productive than doing the same thing by hand. And when you look at what kinds of programs people wrote in, let's say, the 80s, with their basic terminals on, 6664s and stuff like that, they essentially were writing Excel spreadsheets. So I think that the no code idea is extremely powerful and useful. The big problem with it, though, in my opinion, is that Excel works because we have 500 years of bookkeeping and accounting in certain kinds of programs that people want to write over and over and over again. And so because we understand extremely well what the job of a quote spreadsheet is, we can make a really great spreadsheet that just does that. And I think that the big thing that's different about blockchain is that we don't really know what blockchain is for. And if we go too fast into no code only things, then we'll basically build copy and paste machines that can only build very particular kinds of applications. And I think that blockchain is going to be successful when we unlock a huge amount of creativity about what it can even mean to be a blockchain program. And so Reach, our goal is to be in that third category, the JavaScript category, where it's undeniable that it's easier to program a language like JavaScript than C or assembly. And so we want to expand the audience of blockchain programmers to include massively more people, so they'll be able to try new and experimental things, and they can do that with our language Reach.
On the massively more people front, it seems like a lot of platforms are going like mobile as a focus. I know crypto.com, it's like you can only access it using mobile. And there's a lot of interesting apps that are being done. I see you can use like a lot of cute use cases just using your platform for mobile. Do you think the push for mobile is something that's going to be continuing?
Yeah, I think that, mobile as like a delivery platform is clearly the way to go, because I mean there are many people who they just don't have personal computers in the way that we think of them. They're the only way that they experience the internet and the web is through mobile apps. And so I think that that is a necessary given thing. And I think when we talk about development tools and sort of platforms, it becomes much harder. And honestly, I try to not like make comments or specific things about like specific mobile operating systems and things like that. But one problem that we have in this space is that blockchain and cryptocurrencies still have a negative reputation among many platforms, and I think that will inhibit creating effective wallets and apps that are crypto enabled. So, for instance, on my I can build an app that can access the credit card that my phone knows about without having to build in credit card processing myself. And I think that we want to get to a place where your crypto wallet is built into your mobile phone, such that it's a service that everyone else can use. And I personally fear that there's going to be kind of a roadblock period of time where we can't do that. And we have to build things that are sort of desktop and web first, even though we know that doing it on mobile is the right thing. But there are just such strong platform holders that I think will prevent us from doing that in the short run, that it's too painful to do that. And that's why you can see things like, the thing that you mentioned. There are many people that have mobile apps that enable you to access cryptocurrencies, but really they're just web apps, right? Because those are centralized wallets that you're really just making web calls, to something else that's not really holding your actual crypto. And I think that we want to get to a place where the smart contract part of blockchain is viable and useful. And that's the place where I don't think that there's enough mobile development right now.
Coming from, the Ivy League background and knowing like some of the best coders in the space, do you think that blockchain is looked down on a certain degree in terms of what it can do because of its past? Or how do you see things for like top coders who are looking to focus their efforts? Are they looking in blockchain, or are they still kind of testing the waters?
I think that this is kind of a hard to say and hard to really generalize about. What I would say is that blockchain has the cachet of being like complicated, being related to cryptography. That's cool. There's this finance thing. I knew many people where their whole goal in studying computer science, for instance, was to go into quantitative trading. And that is definitely a big draw. And so I think that if anything, I would say the problem with blockchain is that it is more, I don't know, elitist than it should be, because it's so complicated to get into that there's this very high threshold to get started. On the other hand, I do think that, blockchain is a little bit funny because there's like the technological side, there's kind of the finance side, and then there's kind of like the political side. And all three of those are definitely there in the crypto world, and they're kind of at odds with one another. And even if we look at the political side, there's people that are sort of like on the left of the political value of blockchain and on the right of the political value of blockchain. In the same way that we can read about left anarchists and right anarchists in anarchist history. And so I think that all of these groups like fight each other and hate each other. You know what I mean? The tech people are like, I don't care about that other stuff. Maybe they side with one particular political group. And if I would say, what is the quote problem with blockchain in the among programmers, it's that it is associated with one of these groups in people's minds, and that gives them just like a social distaste for it. For instance, I recall reading recently that there was a major game platform that said that they were opposed to NFTs because they were bad for the environment. And I think that that is an example of people fixing on one particular idea in blockchain and one particular way of doing something and associating with the whole group, and it kind of poisons the well for everybody else. Because there is this idea that, proof of work blockchains use lots of energy, but we know that there are many other blockchain technologies that don't have that problem, even if that were a problem.
I get so many people on here that are self-taught, and very rarely do I get someone with the CV as built out as you have in computer science. What do you think this status of coding education is now? And is that something that we need to weave in, or how are you seeing it in terms of curriculum at the university level and before?
Yeah, this is it's interesting that you bring this up, because like I don't personally feel like this is really related to my identity as like a blockchain person
Mhm.
or anything like that, but this is something that I am personally really passionate about. I like the idea that to realize that programming and computer science and computation are fundamental parts of you know, of mathematics in life. You know, when you are doing basic arithmetic and, you know, middle school and whatnot, right now there's this kind of conception that it's like you're doing like a quote baby version of engineering, where when you grow up and you go to college and then you do calculus, and then once you do calculus, then you do electrical engineering. And that is the reason why you were doing arithmetic way back then, because you were training to get up to this point where you could do, I don't know, like nuclear physics or like send rockets to the moon. This idea that like the point of math is to get you to physics. And I think that, you know, physics is great. I love physics. I love, you know, nuclear engineering and rocket ships and all that. Those are all cool things. But on the other hand, I think a more something that is going to be more in common with everybody is that mathematics is really programming, where we have simplified things to make it so that there are only numbers. When it really comes down to it, the kinds of things that you do in your programming are the same kinds of things that you do when you're doing math, which is that you're designing functions, you're thinking about data types, you're thinking about how to combine them together. And I think that there all the various pushes in the United States and elsewhere to bring computing away from college into you know, the K through 12 experience are all extremely valuable because of this idea of talking about and teaching computation as like a fundamental thing. So, you know, my advisor and his advisor, they like to say that, you know, there's the 4 R's: reading, writing, arithmetic, and programming. And I really love that idea. And I think that you know, uh, I'm I'm in support of, you know, every different way to do that. There are just so many different ways to think about how to learn to program. It's just you know, this is in fact people's entire career, how to think about this problem.
You know, it seems like with your platform that you hit on so many of the abilities to do use cases that are interesting, and the scalability of a lot of these use cases can be built out so, you know, in depth. Is there any use cases that you're keeping your eye on right now that are of a particular interest, either to reach or just in general?
Yeah. So I mean, what I would say is um, the kinds of use cases that people are putting blockchain to right now, there are definitely cool ones that are very interesting, but I honestly don't see a lot of new creative ideas coming up. And so what I fear is that people get fixated on like a particular thing. Like there was a time when, I don't know, uh, token swaps was the cool thing. And then there was a time when ICOs was the cool thing. And then there was a time when this and then that. There's like these very small things. And that feels to me like uh, there's a relatively small group of people that fixes on an idea. That new idea gets press. A few more people join in. And I think that the value of blockchain will come when there are hundreds of different things being built. As an example, if I were to walk up to you and I said, oh, you know, I'm starting a company. And then you said, oh, cool. Well, like, what's your company going to use? Like, what's special about your company? And if I told you, guess what? My company uses computers. You would like look at me like I've got 4 heads. Like, why are you telling me this? Like every company uses computers. On the other hand, if I told you, and of course, if I told you that my company uses computers, you would have a very low probability of guessing what my company did. You know what I mean? It wouldn't really reveal any information. And that's why you would think it would be crazy that I would tell you this. On the other hand, if I told you I'm starting a company and it's a blockchain company, we have to be honest with ourselves. The size of this community is such that if I told you that, you could probably guess what my company is going to be doing. You know, maybe you're not going to like get it on just the first thing, but you're certainly more likely to get it than if I said that, oh, I do computing. Now, on the other hand, like computing is super boring, right? It would be crazy to say it. Something that is a little bit more techy, if I were to say like, oh, I build smartphone apps, like, again, I'm not really telling you anything about what my company does. And that is the place that we need to be with blockchain. We need to be in a place where there are so many ideas, so many people working on it, so many creative things that it would be like impossible for one person to quote, know what's going on in blockchain. And that is definitely something that you can do right now. And I think that that's kind of a sign of what I perceive the problem And so my whole goal in Reach is to build something that will bring in not just 100 more people, not 1,000 more people, but I want there to be 1 million blockchain developers, more than 1 million blockchain developers, so that there can be all of those cool creative ideas to try to figure out some great killer app for blockchain.
It seems like there's so few great tools like Reach. Like, what inspired you to say, I need to bring a tool out there that can couple all these use cases and get people going on the platform?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, to be like fully transparent on this, it's because I'm not a creative person. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have a good idea for what would be the good thing, but I know how to build compilers, and I know how to understand something really complicated and present a nice abstraction for it. Like, my whole career has been all of my academic career, that is, has been all about trying to discover abstractions that cover a space really well, to hide the things that need to be hidden and show the things that need to be shown, and then combine that. Like, that is sort of like my programming language design identity. And then the other part of that is doing cryptography and verification to make it so that those abstractions are reliable. So the thing that's special about blockchain and Reach is that those two things go together really well, which is why I think that we can provide this really valuable thing. And, at the end of the day, I am sort of like, I'm in like the philosophy side of why blockchain is important. And, the finance side, the tech side, they're cool. But honestly, to me, like, the part of the tech that I care more about is like writing a great compiler and verifier. I don't really care that much about cryptography. I'll learn about it, but I don't really care a huge deal about it.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of these platforms that are able to scale are ones that weave in with existing education. Like Remix has the tutorials and they weave in. Do you see the growth of Reach being to help the developer evangelization and helping people with the education front? Or are you providing the tools and then working with platforms? Or how are you seeing this as a tool that someone can run with?
Yeah, totally. I think that, there's this cliche that it's really hard to teach people new things. And when people talk about that, they almost say it as a way of insulting the people that, oh, they can't learn any new things. But I think that actually it's just that learning anything is just really, really hard. And if you are trying to do something that's very different than what came before, then there's this big hurdle to get over. And so a big part of our goal in Reach is try to eliminate as many barriers as possible to lower the floor for people to get involved. So rather than like inventing some new syntax for something, we just take the syntax of the most popular language on the planet, JavaScript. Rather than having people learn totally new ways of deploying their application using new kinds of runtimes, we just say, guess what? You get to write your program in Node.js. You get to use Docker to test and deploy it. You get to use, React or any other JavaScript library when you want to build your front end. So our sort of goal is to make a product that has a really clean abstraction that you can learn that. And, you do need to learn something about blockchain new, but we want to make it so that all the other pieces are as smooth as possible and you can integrate with what your existing knowledge is. I say existing knowledge, assuming that someone coming to Reach is already already a quote full stack web developer. And not that they are some sort of special angelic race that are the most important ones, but just that they are the most prevalent type of programmer on the planet. There are hundreds and thousands of different boot camps and curricula that will teach you how to become that. And so it's very easy to, like, if my advice is to someone who says, I don't know anything about blockchain, but technically, but I want to get into it, well, then what you can do is you can learn how to become a full stack web developer and at the same time learn Reach. And those two things will make it so that you can build your dream blockchain app completely by yourself. And like, I am really firmly of the belief that like the best entrepreneurs are ones that can, with a very small budget, build a prototype that can get them in front of funders that they can show off their thing to and get real bucks to build something. And so essentially what that means is that they either need to, have basic programming skills themselves or hook up with someone that has basic programming skills. And right now, in a world without Reach, you basically need to have amazing technical skills or find someone with amazing technical skills to be able to use all the complicated blockchain programming tools. So I would say that I think about it less in terms of what does Reach do for education, But in terms of Reach's explicit goal is to connect with everything that is already out there and say that you don't have to learn a special new way to build front ends that are based on blockchain. You can use any front end technology that currently exists, because guess what? They all have a really great way of integrating with, web JavaScript or something like that.
From when you were learning JavaScript, what were some of the positive things that were being used by tools that you used that you thought, hey, I should incorporate this into Reach? Like, what were some aspects of a coding tool that's useful?
I think that I'm actually probably a really bad person to ask this to, because like when I first learned to program, I use the editor called ed. So how ed works is you type in ed file and then it doesn't print out anything. And then if you want to modify line 5, you type in 5 and then hit enter and it shows you line 5, and you can type in a new version of line 5. And then you then have to go say, well, now I want to change line 7 or something like that. So this is like an extremely insane way to program. But like I learned how to program C using that. And so if you were to like watch me program, I use like the most boring version, like the most boring editor possible. I don't have any cool features enabled. So I think that I'm pretty ignorant about this. So what I do is I leverage the experience of lots of other people on our team. And I really love watching people learn how to use Reach and how to program with it. Just like observing, people have this idea that like, oh, user experience designers, they're only useful when you're like, I don't know, making like a car or something like that, where you got to like watch like, oh, people really want to put their hand here or something like, I don't know. I'm kind of making a cliche about what a user interface expert is. But I think that the thing is that programming languages are themselves user interfaces, and it's worthwhile studying what people's actual experiences are. So I spend a huge amount of time thinking about like, what are great error messages and how can I make it so that an error message from a compiler doesn't say something like, I don't know, mismatch parentheses somewhere in the program. You know what I mean? Like, I really want to make sure that I can like find exactly the line of code that it was related to. And so one of the things I do in Reach, for instance, is we spend a huge amount of effort in the compiler making sure that like the source location of where there was an error of where you put something in your program gets tracked all the way through the compilation process, even actually to when we deploy the smart contract. So when the smart contract errors for any reason, it's going to return a code that you can look at that code and connect it back up to the fact that this happened on line 17 of your original program, and we can interpret the answer back. Now, we are not perfect at this yet, but that's just kind of a small example of what of the way that I feel you need to like serve the actual person rather than thinking about like, oh, I'm making a technical product that has these 10 checkboxes in it and like it's good enough if it has those things. Like, it doesn't matter. And if people can't understand and use your thing, whether that product is, an app or a website or a crypto protocol or, a programming language, it's not useful.
Yeah, and they'll throw up their hands and try to go no code. I think your push there to make it less intimidating is a one that's appreciated by a great many people that sometimes start on JavaScript. So that's appreciated by a great many. I get a lot of tweets that I see on my feed about Algorand, and I almost never am able to talk to someone that is a power user that knows a lot about it. What would you say to someone that doesn't know a lot about the blockchain, what they're into and what they do in particular that is of interest to you?
Sure, yeah. So Reach is a partner with Algorand. So Reach, when you write a program in Reach, you can compile that to many backend platforms, many backend consensus networks. So you write your program once, and you can deploy it on a variety of platforms, and Algorand is one of those. And so if I were to, so imagine that someone walks up to me and they say, "What's Algorand?" You know what I mean? My question is like, do you know anything about blockchain and cryptocurrency in the first place? Because if you don't know anything about that, then now I need to explain blockchain to you. So we're going to assume that you know that, but maybe you're just unsure about Algorand itself. I think the most important thing that you want to know about Algorand is that A, it is a proof of stake network. So that's a really important thing. As a proof of stake network, it has no, the way that they deal with inflation of the currency is quite unique. So they basically had like pre-sold portions of the token, and then what they do is they slowly inflate the currency by paying rewards to algo holders. So if you hold algos, you are basically getting equalized new tokens over time. And so that is slowly increasing the supply up to a fixed one. So those two things that I just said are like the tech thing. Okay, so Algorand is one of those proof of stake ones. And then the finance thing, which is like, here's its story for the currency. So those are sort of things that you always want to think about when you enter a new, when you think about a new consensus network, like where does it fit in kinds of those properties? Like what is its cryptocurrency story and what is its decentralization story? The other thing that's important to know about Algorand is that it is designed to be extremely tight and like high throughput. So for instance, like rounds and confirmations happen in 5 seconds, like 5 seconds on the global Algorand network. So, that's like another one of these like weird technical details that is really important for practically comparing blockchains, but it is something that's relevant. And then so those things that I've just kind of described are like, they're like the sales pitch version of Algorand. That's what would be like on the back of the box or anything like that. But if we were to like think about it from like, what do I know as a power user that, normal people wouldn't know? The thing that I would say that's really cool about Algorand is that they do a good job of defining a small bunch, like a small set of little components that fit together really elegantly. So as an example of this, something like a network like Ethereum has a certain amount of elegance because it says, we are EVM and everything you do is running EVM code. And that's really simple. The problem with that is that, yes, it is one abstraction that you have to think about, but it's a really complicated abstraction. And it's very hard to like fit that abstraction together. So just as a tiny example of what I mean by that. Right now, when you do something from the outside to Ethereum, you can only call a program that like already exists. You can't, for instance, like upload EVM code that will do 3 things all atomically. And if those 3 things fail, then the entire computation fails.
So Algorand really has a technical sophistication that you latched onto and was interesting to you.
Yeah. And so like that idea of like not being able to do something, these like, 3 things atomically on Ethereum, like that concept comes from, there's this vision about what it should do, this simple abstraction of everything is EVM, but that abstraction is not like sufficiently permeated throughout the network. Now, an Algorand, the way that it works is that there's a very small set of transaction types, and these can be combined in any sequence with one another to form larger atomic groups that can do a single action. And I feel like I'm talking like an insane person to someone who doesn't know what I'm saying, but I don't know. There's this technical elegance that I really enjoy about working with Algorand. Mm-hmm. And, I guess so to say one other thing about it is that compared to many companies and blockchains, they're like surprisingly fast moving. So they will do, a consensus network upgrade, a couple times a year. And all those will add like drastically new features that are really, really different. In contrast, some other chains, they take a long time to do something. And that can be really, really frustrating as a power user that wants to do more.
I was listening to another podcast and they were asking someone that was a CTO of one of these blockchain companies. And he gave like a very involved, like you just did, nuanced answer. And then the questioner said, well, what if they don't have any technical expertise? And he said, look to see how many GitHub commits they have every 7 days. Is that a good metric, do you think, or can that be fudged?
So the idea of measuring GitHub commits as like a way of seeing someone's progress and ability, I don't know, it's really like, it's really dangerous to say like that is the measure, because any metric can be fudged. I think that what they're trying to get at though is that you want, like, it can be valuable to look at something that is being actively developed. That is exciting because you know that progress is happening. On the other hand, a lot of commits could mean people are flailing around trying to fix, a sinking ship as it's going down. I think that, if you are technically minded, then being able to go in and like really understand what is going on behind the scenes of a consensus network is really valuable. And I love that they're all open source and you can figure out what's going on. And I think that, to me, there's no substitute for really trying to build something yourself. And I say that as, a power user that knows how to do that. And I think that, my goal with Reach, at least, is to make it so that anyone could be in that category. You can go try to write a really simple Reach program, for instance, and then launch it on Ethereum, launch it on Algorand, launch it on one of the other networks, and see what it's like, that experience. And that's kind of a good way to evaluate for yourself.
Yeah, when I reached out to someone to talk about your platform, they were saying that they were using your tool in coordination with a MOOC that they were doing. I think it was on edX or Coursera. And just the self-education is strong, and having those tools at your disposal to use, it seems like is a good way to go, especially with the push for online learning. Is there anything that people need to know about getting onboarded onto Reach before they jump in, or what would you point people to in terms of the tutorial or how to be able to get started?
Yeah. So if you go to our website, docs.reach.sh, and I'm sure that you'll add a link to that, you'll find that there is a link to a tutorial. And the goal of this tutorial is to sort of cut through all of the complexity of blockchain and teach how to do a dApp without having to learn about a whole bunch of complicated blockchain stuff. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is that there are some tutorials that if you were to go say, tell me about blockchain, they're going to say, well, I'd love to tell you about blockchain, but first I really need to tell you about signatures. And once I tell you about signatures, I really need to tell you about hashing functions. And they're going to like drown you in cryptography before building something. And what they are saying is that you need to know cryptography to do blockchain well. And that's just wrong. The other thing that a tutorial might do is to say, oh, I'd love to teach you about blockchain, but first I need to tell you about liquidity swaps. And, there's this thing, there's this curve, and we got to stay on this curve. And you're like, I don't know anything about currency trading. Why do I just want to learn about blockchain? And the way that we have tried to do that with our learning materials is we say, you can do blockchain and you can write a program that like nobody cares about, but you already understand what this program does. And so we use a really simple example, which is that you and me have played rock, paper, scissors before, or Rochambeau, or these things, where we have a really simple problem, which is that I can, throw a rock, paper, or scissors at you. And then what we're going to do is we're going to bet money on it. And anytime we bet money, well, like if you and I really wanted to do this, like I would say, okay, well, how about you give the $5 to me and I'll just hold on to it. That way you don't like run away if you lost or something like that. And you'll be like, but why do you hold the money? I think I should hold the money. And then we're like, okay, well, actually, how about we get my cousin to hold the money? And oh, I don't really like my cousin, so he's not going to treat me differently. This is an extremely down-to-earth problem that everybody understands what it's like. Having a wager means that you have to have a trusted middleman in the normal world. And what blockchain provides is the ability to have people who do not trust each other work together without a trusted middleman. That, in one small phrase, is what blockchain provides: trustless cooperation without middlemen. And that's really valuable. And it's really simple to build a, short 20-line program that does that using a really simple domain like rock, paper, scissors. And so if you go to our tutorial, we'll walk through a really simple program like this. And then the thing that happens next is that, just learning a language by yourself is really difficult and really painful, no matter how easy the language is. You really want to join a community of people who are learning the same with you. And so we try to create a really active Discord community where people can, collaborate and share. And that's one of the major goals of Reach, is to have a vibrant Discord world.
Sharing that experience with people, I think, also encourages you, like having an accountability partner to help you with your education and everything. Jay, I really appreciate you being on the show today. And I would send people over to your site. And as Jay said earlier, I'll be linking to it in the description below. So if you're into JavaScript, if you're trying to learn this technology, which I know a great many of you that reach out to me are, I would say this is a great tool to do that. And Jay, I think you'll agree, JavaScript is a great way to build into other platforms as well. And from that, you can branch off to a great many languages. So Jay, I really appreciate being on the show, and thanks again for bringing your expertise on Algorand, which is something that we all hear a lot about being on crypto Twitter, but don't have the understanding that you do.
Cool. Yeah, it was a pleasure today, and great talking to you, Rob. Thanks.